Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we're going to look at the origins of the Adeptus Mechanicus, drawing on the Titanicus Codex and the Horus Heresy book Betrayal. The cult of the machine god began many thousands of years ago, before the birth of the Imperium, during the time known as the Age of Strife. The event that triggered the Age of Strife must forever remain a mystery, but very likely the increased turmoil in warp space was one of the most influential factors. Only by means of the ethereal realm of warp space can interstellar travel take place. Erratic disturbances in warp space called warp storms make it almost impossible for spacecraft to travel through and between star systems. During the Age of Strife, the warp storms became frequent and more intense, spreading throughout the galaxy until space travel became next to impossible. Individual solar systems became isolated and many human colonies, hitherto dependent upon interstellar contact, were lost. Societies collapsed, anarchy prevailed, and the old civilization of mankind passed away forever. During the Age of Strife, the Earth could no longer acquire sufficient food or resources to accommodate its people. Without access to the wider galaxy, the home world could not survive until billions died as a result of war and starvation. The planet soon became a battleground where rival warlords fought over the ruins of a once great civilization. All of Earth's ancient knowledge was lost, and its cities destroyed. The planet became little more than a desert, where its people were reduced to the level of brute savages, fighting over the scarce land and water that remained. Now friends, I tell you all this to set the scene, and now we're going to look at Mars and how that was impacted. On Mars, the process of disintegration began as it began on Earth, but because of the unique conditions on Mars, events were to develop entirely differently. Because of a lack of maintenance, the planet's atmospheric radiation shields soon disintegrated. Solar radiation poured onto the surface, destroying the fragile ecosystem and wiping out sparse vegetation which had taken millennia to cultivate. Plagues caused by the high radiation levels slew most of the population. Of those who survived, most became deranged by sickness. Many turned into mutant zombies or gibbering cannibals. The destruction of the entire planet seemed likely. However, this was not to be, for a new idea began to spread amongst the people. A religion of survival, the cult Mechanicus, dedicated to the machine god. The devotees of the machine god sought out the now scattered technology needed to rebuild temporary radiation shelters. The cult demanded absolute devotion from its followers, for only by selfless dedication and often personal sacrifice could machines be recovered or the planet saved. Under the direction of their tech priest leaders, the cultists set about restoring order to the world. They began to build shelters to protect themselves from the radiation storms, and oxygen generators and food processing machines to enable them to live behind the enclosed shielding. There were few shelters even for the tech priests and none for unbelievers. Marauders and mutant raiders tried to force their way inside the hurriedly constructed buildings. Many of the cultists died defending their shelters, and some early shelters were destroyed, but the survivors emerged all the stronger and more determined. The people interpreted their survival in the face of tremendous odds as vindication of the cult Mechanicus and its beliefs. Their resolve and devotion to the cult became unshakable. Whilst rival warlords battled over the remnants of Earth, the tech priests rebuilt Mars in the image of their inhuman god. On red sand there rose the final effort for it to become greatly established on Mars, the first temples of the machine god, and the people came to worship at the high altar of technology. Then, as well as restoring the rad shields, the tech priests managed to also restore general order, restore many of the temples to the Great Machine, which would then be able to churn out materials and machinery to help people, including synthetic food and produce oxygen. And it is from there Mars was rebuilt in the image of their inhuman god construct. The tech priests scoured the ruins of Mars for surviving machinery, which they enshrined within the Temple of All Knowledge. Within the temple's plasteel shell, shining pistons held the vaulted roof almost a mile above. The shafts of each piston were so constructed that they moved to raise and lower the roof altering its acoustic properties to accentuate the hymns of praise sung to the machine god. The high altar within took the form of a vast database containing the whole knowledge of the tech priests. Even today, every new discovery is dedicated to this altar. Every temple on Mars and throughout the Forge worlds is connected to the high altar by means of a living transmat link, a psychic servitor whose mind co-joins all altars of the cult Mechanicus into one holy machine entity. United under this new force, Mars sent ships out into the solar system, but they found nothing but chaos and danger there. So instead they turned their attention to old Earth. They knew there were many secrets there, amongst the warring barbarians that the Emperor would be trying to unite, and if they found them, they would be able to use them for Mars, and perhaps stop those barbarians reaching for their planet. So there was a bitter rivalry, savagery, between the tech priests and the techno-barbarian tribes, and that caste of tyrants that held sway over old Earth. So the tech priests would plunder what they could from Earth, whilst also wanting to know what was there in the wider galaxy. So from time to time they would send out great vessels into the warp to get some clue. These were the first explorator fleets of Mars. Hundreds were sent out over centuries. Some found colonies that would later become Forge worlds, as they would be eventually reunited into the Imperium of Man. When the Emperor had eventually reunited Terra, the Lords of Mars watched events unfold, and they saw a possible kindred spirit in the Master of Mankind. He was also a man of science. He also valued technological advancement. Others on Mars saw a deadly new power that they must fear. And as word came to Mars of what the Emperor had been able to accomplish in terms of his superhuman achievements, perhaps considering the Primarchs there and the Space Marines, some tech priests began to think of the Emperor as being like their own machine god. This fulfilled ancient prophecies, and there was great debate on Mars if he should be treated as a saviour or enemy. The Emperor knew about this, of course, because he had been watching the Red Planet too. He knew the struggle that would happen if he, the Emperor, tried to take Mars by force, though he knew it would be of great value to him. So he sought a negotiated alliance with the Mechanicum Parliament. He would get supplies for his armies, and they would build a mighty fleet for him, so he can take his crusade to the stars. The Emperor, for his part, would protect the tech priests and respect the sovereignty of all their Forge worlds spread across the galaxy. The Emperor would also give into service to the Mechanicum 6 of the houses of the navigators to replace the long-dead thrall navigators they had used, so that the ships of Mars can navigate the warp and the galaxy safely again. Now there was some internal strife, but Mars ultimately assented to this alliance, and this alliance was sealed when the Mechanicum's ambassador, the Fabricator General, who spoke for the Parliament, was sent to seal the alliance and was given a war council for the Great Crusade. Access to the giant factories of Mars let the Emperor increase the power of his legions, improve their war gear and supply to them, and the tech priests were able to lend their arts to making war-capable battleships to move his legions across the galaxy and provide the mighty crushing war machines known as Titans to the ever-expanding Imperial military. And one other little bit of trivia that I just thought was important for the alliance between the Emperor and those on Mars. I have gone over this elsewhere, but I just thought I'd mention it here. It is said that the Emperor put the Satan Void Dragon, or at least a shard of it, within Mars. It would become known as the Dragon of Mars. And it is said that it has been entombed on Mars for a long time and became worshipped by the cult Mechanicus before the rise of the Emperor. So perhaps all this was a ploy of the Emperor, possibly anyway. And it's also noted that this dragon may have influenced the things that Mars have been able to create. And on that little bit of trivia, that's where I'll end today's video on the origin of the cult Mechanicus and their alliance to the Master of Mankind.